All right, well, thank you all for joining us today for a very informative session on communicating in a crisis. It has been just a few weeks ago that our worlds changed dramatically. And in our worlds changing, how we communicate also changed. We're using a lot more technology than we used in previous weeks, months, years. But it's also important that we communicate with our workforce, with those around us in a different way. And Chad Carlton is going to talk with us a little bit about that today. Chad is the president of C2 Strategic Communications, and he is going to talk about best practices for dealing with both internal and external factors related to this pandemic. I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping. You'll notice you have a chat box, and that is how we will be accepting questions today. You could enter any questions you have in the chat box. Our team will be going through those throughout the session, collecting them, and then we will do a facilitated moderation at the end. Hopefully we will get to all questions. I know this is an interesting topic, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. But you are on mute as well. So let's let Chad give us a presentation, and then we'll begin the Q&A. Chad, I will hand it over to you.
Great, thanks for having us today to talk a little bit about something that has become a way of life for us during this very difficult time. As we talk about, as we start this presentation, I wanted to mention to folks that if you're communicating about this with other folks, if you could use the Twitter handle at C2 Strategic, that would be great. I appreciate sharing this news with as many people as we can in this process. As Sarah said, we're in uncharted waters here, really, in a lot of ways. And so what we're talking about today is going to talk about the core of crisis communications. The actual techniques will probably change and adapt as we go through this process, and the presentation is designed for that. A little bit of background about C2 Strategic and me. C2 is a public relations and communications firm with offices in Louisville and Indianapolis. We've got a lot of senior folks on our team who are experienced in crisis communications, and we have decades of experience in high stakes communications. My background dealing with crisis, I spent 10 years as a newspaper reporter. I spent then 8 years working with Jerry Abramson and the team at Louisville Metro as the communications director there. And for the last 9 years, I've been running C2 Strategic Communications, which focuses a lot on issues that we're going to hit on today. This scene right here is a scene that some of you are familiar with. You're used to being at the mic and seeing things, the camera's in your face, but others of you are not.
Chad, I'm sorry to interrupt real quick. If you could share your screen, because we are not seeing your presentation and I know what you're talking about. So
okay, great.
Reshare.
That is the problem. Okay, there we go. You can teach an old dog new tricks, I think. How's that looking?
Thank you.
Great. All right. Sorry about that, folks. So as I said, this is the scene where many of us find ourselves today, whether literally or figuratively. We're facing the microphones, whether that's talking to our employees, talking to our customers, talking to our board of directors, talking to the news media. So as we talk about communications, putting yourself in that space is can be scary to some folks. What we always tell people is it's how you say it and what you say that matters. So as you're communicating, whether it's in front of microphones or in an email or on a video conference like this, you need to focus on your message, but how you deliver that message. And right now, we're all looking for confidence, and that's pretty important. The preparation for talking, think first, talk later, is important. At this time, you really do need to take the time to gather the facts, assess the situation, know who on your team is best to communicate that, and know what are the messages that you want to communicate to your audience. As we talk about the things you want to play offense on, not necessarily playing defense on. These are 6 standards of crisis communications. They're really pretty important in all kinds of communications, but they're particularly so when it comes to crisis situations. So the first is be truthful. Never is that more important when you're talking about issues that affect people's health and their livelihood. So this is not the time to leave out important parts of the information because you think, well, that's kind of negative. Honesty is what people are looking for in crisis. And as soon as they find out that you're not being forthright with them, you lose a big part of your audience. You lose a big part of the confidence. And second standard is being consistent. And when we talk about being consistent, I don't mean saying the same thing every time, but being consistent to the core. You're going to have different messages for your employees than you are for your customers or your partners or your board, but they all have to be consistent with each other. And the way you communicate has to be consistent and predictable for folks. Jumping back and forth between an email today and a video conference tomorrow and a newsletter next week, it's confusing to people. So figure out which communications tools you're going to use for which audiences, and give folks that certainty when they're doing it. And we'll talk about it more later about the frequency of those communications. Being receptive means using not just your mouth, but using your ears. There's a lot of information that you can gather by being receptive to your clients, to your staff, your families. They share a lot of information that helps you make good decisions and be smarter as you move forward. So don't forget to listen. Being flexible, that means not taking normal for granted. And gosh, if we're not all getting a lesson in how to be flexible out of this, I don't know when we ever would. But that means that you have to think about what if scenarios. A lot of us get caught up in what I call the theorems of life, where we take for granted that this is always going to be this way, or this is the rule. This is a time when adaptability is important. And to be adaptable, you have to think about the what if scenarios before they happen. So like right now, what if Zoom went down and an hour ago and we had to still give this presentation? I know that Sydney and Sarah have already thought that through and would have been ready for us to go to a different platform. Being prepared means taking all those precautions that you need to do for your health and safety, but also to make sure you've got continuity in place. Any of us who are in a position of leadership or in a communications role, this is a time where you need to make sure that there's somebody else who knows how to do what you do. If you're the only person at the office who knows how to set up the Zoom call, if you're the only person who knows the password to a particular software program, that's a real problem. So right now is a good time to be focused on how you are ready for anything. And finally, be calm. You're leading by example, and so the more you can exude the confidence, the more you're going to get out of the people you're communicating to. We talked about stakeholders. Those are the people you're talking to, and they're in each business, in each agency, each group, there's a different set of those. You see here some examples of those types of stakeholders. Make a list of those if you don't already know them internally. Think about how you're talking to your employees, perhaps differently than your board of directors, perhaps differently from the public or the general media. Again, the message has to be consistent, but it can be a different depth of message. It can emphasize different aspects of that. It can be delivered with different tools. This is a great time to use all the tools in your toolbox in different ways. We have a tool in our toolbox called Building Kentucky, which is a newsletter that many of you all receive every 2 weeks. If you don't, you can sign up for it. But Building Kentucky, we communicated a couple of weeks ago to folks to think about these things about, updating your voicemail, using text alerts. If you have that function set up and you're inclined to use that for certain needs. Video conferencing is huge. I don't know anybody that I've talked to in business that hasn't, if they weren't using video conferencing 2 weeks ago, they are now. And if you're on this call and this is your only exposure to it, jump in, because it is going to be here when the pandemic is over. It is something that is going to change the way we do business. We'll still be meeting, we'll still be getting together, because as far as I can tell you, we haven't figured out a way to make a cocktail and serve it to people on this platform. But it's going to be a new way that we do business, and it's better to try it out now. I mentioned being creative, and a lot of businesses are learning new and different ways to be creative. This is an example, represents some folks in the healthcare industry of how they are working to communicate to some of the most fragile people in our communities, those who are in nursing homes with their families who can't visit them. So this is a simple approach.
Here's Mom.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Mommy.
Hi, baby.
What you doing?
What?
You look so cute.
Yeah.
I miss you.
Well, I was only gone a couple of days.
I know, sweetie. We'll see you soon, okay?
Okay.
So you see a way that nursing homes adapted to that negative situation. I don't know about you, but that's much more humane than seeing people sitting outside of nursing home windows looking in and at their loved one inside. Those images are just heartbreaking. I want to talk a little bit about best practices. I've seen a lot of communications in the last several days. I will give a big kudo to GLI and Sarah and her team. They've done a great job of keeping us all informed and focused on things. And they've followed a lot of these practices. There are a lot of people trying to communicate at the same time. All of us are trying to do the right thing, but I get probably 12 to 20 email newsletters, updates from the different organizations and different advisors that I have. And one of the things that's critical that I have to criticize about many of those is they're long, dense writing. Shorter is better. Bite-sized chunks is the way to do it. A lot of the MailChimp types of applications are designed to allow you to group it in that way so that you get to the news that the person wants. The other thing is visuals. If I open an email or a newsletter and it's 2 pages of copy, I'm pretty likely to move on to the next thing unless there's just something urgent in that. It's just too overwhelming. So this is where visuals, whether they be images, whether they be graphics, infographics, they're pretty important. You need to include a call to action in most of your emails. If you're giving people information, it's because you want them to do something. And either that's to give you feedback or direct them, funnel them into a place where they can go. So highlight those links, make it clear at the top of this. This is an email or this is a letter to help connect you with resources to apply for loans or to get unemployment benefits or to learn how the schedule for our company is changing or to put you in touch with folks. And again, as we talked about earlier, tailor your message to your audience. Some people are going to need more information and more detail. That might be people on your team that you're working with where you need to fill things out. Your customers may not need to know so much. They may just need that touch every once in a while that says, we're here, can't knock on our door like normally, but here's how you can get in touch with someone who can help you and move things forward. As we talk with our clients and customers, it's important to be proactive. That means anticipating what your clients and customers' needs are going to be and try to be there before they're wearing you out and tying up your phone lines or filling your email boxes. So this is a time when you want your teams to be problem solvers, and you want to pump that information out in a progressive way that lets folks know that you know what you're doing and you're in charge. Use all of your available tools. Don't take for granted that people are reading their emails. People are out of their routines. They're doing things differently. You've got to come in some different doors. If you're not getting, if you can tell whether people are opening their emails. If they're not opening their emails, that's the point to say, what are the other tools that I can do to get in touch with this person, and how can I make sure that they're just not getting stuff that's valuable that they need that's ending up in their spam filters or their junk mailbox. This is a good time for all of us to ask for patience. I think there's a lot of that right now. People aren't as aggressive and demanding with a lot of things as they have been. But in some cases, when you're talking about getting your paycheck, how you feed your family, you're going to run into some folks who are pretty impatient and pretty exasperated. So this is a time for you to ask for patience. A lot of times, if you just ask for it, people will give it. And then make sure you tell people what you're doing, and then you actually do it. Again, communicating things. This is a time to really CQ everything. If you're going to have a link in your email that tells people, here's where you go to get more information, make sure that link works. Double check those types of things. If you're sharing information, make sure you're going back and updating that. What you sent out last week that you thought was great might have changed. So this is a time when having a little bit extra attention to accuracy and detail helps improve your credibility. I want to talk about how there's a couple of examples of how our clients are sharing information. As this was breaking, one of our clients, WellCare, a Medicaid managed care company, focused on getting this quick animation out on social media to let folks know what they needed to do. Quick way just basically to tell people, share some information. I think you could see that's probably more likely to get people's attention and doing that than sending, just a dense email out that had the same information in it, but took, 250 words to share it. Another way we use that, this is with a project that we're working on, a transportation project. Offices were closing, but we had a survey that was out, and we gave people different options to fill out that survey online, or to give us or to drop that off in a location. So making sure that you're adaptable and reach people in different ways. A lot of us are having conversations with employees that are really tough these days. We're talking about people being furloughed or laid off. We're talking about people who find themselves in a position they never thought they would be in, and you never thought they would be in. This is a time where being calm and concerned and caring is critical. Taking the extra time to communicate, to listen is pretty important. Making sure that this is a consistent and continuous channel with folks. There's a lot of anxiety out there, and they're looking to you for answers. And honestly, you may not always have those answers. A lot of us don't know what tomorrow is going to be like, or next week is going to be like in our businesses. So it's very difficult to say with certainty to other people about that. But what you can do is be honest, and particularly be honest with people about pocketbook issues. If you run a small business and you're not going to be able to keep people on, you've got to be honest to them. It's not necessarily your responsibility to figure out how they feed their families, but you owe it to them to tell them, hey, here's where we're at. Here's where we're going to be in 2 weeks. Here's those challenges. They will appreciate that from you, and they will be more likely to be loyal to you and come back when things are better, or struggle through and do the things that they need to do to help your business keep going. And that last item is right at that point. It's with your employees, you can either create ambassadors or you can create adversaries. We've seen some examples of adversaries. These are oftentimes employees who are going to the news media or going public with complaints they have about management because they don't feel like their concerns are being addressed, and they don't feel like they have a vehicle to do that. Some of that stems from not sharing information, not including them at the table, not being as honest with them as possible, and simply for asking them to be your helpers in this, to be your ambassadors, because it's not going to do, it may be, in the short term, it may be beneficial to employees to draw attention to issues that they see that certainly put their health in jeopardy, but also their paycheck in jeopardy. When this is over with, the relationships on those issues are going to be there, and some of those are going to leave lasting marks. So right now, the more you can do to ensure that your team is all rowing in the same direction, has a consistent message, and feels like they're being listened to, not necessarily that you're giving in to everything that they want, but that they're being heard, is critically important. Here's a good example of using a tool that many of you know, Spencer Bruce at Louisville Water Company. He shared this as part of their weekly newsletter a week or two ago. It's a short video.
A couple of weeks ago, life was very different both at our homes and here at Louisville Water. The coronavirus has changed our normal. So I first want to say that I hope you and your families are managing through this as best as possible, and that you stay safe and healthy. I also want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you. Many of you have picked up your offices and you're working remotely. Others of you are still continuing to come to work, but you're not seeing the familiar faces that you once did. We're all dealing with the changes brought about to try to stop the spread of this virus. At Louisville Water, we all know that we are a lifeline to this community, and we are part of the solution. Our product, Louisville Pure Tap, has never been more important. And so I want to thank each of you for continuing to deliver outstanding customer service and great tasting high quality water. No one knows how long this new normal is going to last, but our leadership team is going to continue to deliver daily updates. And please keep the communication open between your coworkers and your managers. We will make it through this emergency together, and we will be stronger when it's over. So thank you for your dedication. Thank you for your support of our community, and please stay safe.
So you see Spencer there, I think he said thank you about 6 times in a 1-minute video. That's a case where I think that was not over communications. Making sure that his employees feel appreciated and that they stay making sure that our water is still safe to drink and we have plenty of it is pretty important responsibility. I want to shift now and talk about talking with reporters. And many of you know Carrie Richardson on our team. She's the Executive Vice President here at C2. And she put together this video, which we shared with, again, our Building Kentucky subscribers a couple of weeks ago. And we'll talk about the advice here once you listen to her video.
Let's say your business gets a call from a reporter asking about how to respond to coronavirus. What do you say? What should you say? The rules for talking with the media during a public health issue are the same as any other time you talk to a reporter. So here are a few quick tips. Stick to what you know. You don't need to explain how a virus travels or the impact of overseas supply chains. Just explain what's happening in your own business. No one has more expertise than you. Be truthful. Be accurate and transparent. People need information they can trust. Being secretive or embellishing facts corrodes confidence in you and in your business. Don't speculate. Stick to the facts. Guessing at what could happen in a public health crisis can fuel panic or create a false sense of security. Focus on solutions. Complaining about whatever challenge you're facing doesn't help you, your employees, or your customers. Explain what you're doing to overcome that challenge. It positions you as forward-thinking and resourceful. Finally, talk to your stakeholders first. The first people who need to hear from you are those who are closest to you, your employees and your customers. Don't let anybody be surprised when they see you on TV. Remember, coronavirus is a public health concern that will pass with time. Your goal is to maintain your business's reputation for the long haul. That means communicating with empathy and honesty and compassion. That's true no matter the subject.
Carrie's so much better than I am at delivering this. She should be here instead of me. One of the things that we are all dealing with right now is there's a lot of negative news out there. And so we're trying to look for ways to help our clients focus on the positives. One of the things that we did right off the bat, we represent Omni Hotels here. And as you know, this has been a real punch to the hospitality industry. They had a lot of food that was not going to go to their convention goers and customers. They ended up donating that to a local food effort, Ed Lee's food effort to feed hospitality workers. And at the time when most of the focus was on a lot of businesses closing or being hurt, we pitched that as a positive story. This is another client, Pet First. It does pet insurance in Southern Indiana. And we were able to take this new thing that we're dealing with, huddling at home with our families and our four-legged family members, and help turn this into a positive with one of the local stations and setting up an interview with Katie Blakely using Skype.
So a lot of us are working from home right now, and that can mean new distractions like your dog. That's my experience right now. Whining and barking during your conference call turns out not a great combination. This challenge isn't new for everyone, though. Pet First pet insurance employees in Jeffersonville are working remotely with their dogs and cats now, but before social distancing was a thing, they would bring their pets with them into the office. I interviewed them about it last year, and they say your pets can actually increase your productivity if you have a few tricks under your belt.
Pets are so similar to people in so many ways. And just like this is an adjustment for all of us and having to adjust our routines to being home close to 100% of the time, your pets typically do get a break from their pet parents and their siblings once in a while. So your pets need breaks and they need space and they need time to rest as well. So making sure that you're adapting your own routine, but also being conscious of your pets.
I know that for me, my biggest concern would be barking. Ernie, I swear if I tell him no when he's barking, he just thinks I'm barking at him and it's a game and he barks louder. And do you have any advice like how we can get our pets to stay as quiet as possible during the workday?
Yeah, I think it just takes some practice. It takes some positive reinforcement because like you, our dog does not respond well to no. He responds better to positive affirmation of when he's being quiet and being a good boy and just snuggled up on the couch. That's when we take the opportunity to remind him this is a good boy. This is good behavior. I think the good news is working from pets, it's typically all positive. From a mental health perspective, from a physical health perspective, they give us a reason to get outside. They give us a reason to take a break and share in a belly rub. So I think we'll see more organizations advocating for a pet-friendly workplace.
So Pet First also says that the more you can make your dog's day like it was before COVID-19, the better it's going to be in the long run. So try to keep the same meal times and walk times even while you're inside.
A lot of those good tips go for those of you who have young children at home too, and maybe you can apply some of those to them. When we talk about dealing with the media, this crisis, both the health portions of it and the economic portions of it are certainly being covered by the media and certainly are going to continue to be covered by the media. And for some businesses, this is an unfamiliar place. They may not be businesses that normally get media attention or scrutiny, or the folks who are normally dealing with that may be pulled in other directions right now. So here are a few tips for what to do when reporters call and or knock on your door. Almost always no comment is the wrong answer. There are a lot of ways to not relay information and answer every question that a reporter has without saying no comment. Hiding and not returning a phone call is the same experience. It's better to develop a limited statement or key points and stick to those, and to simply not answer every question that comes your way or divulge every piece of information just because you know it. You have a right to share information that you feel is appropriate to share. One of the challenges one of the mistakes I see people make a lot is either falling into the trap of leading questions. Isn't it going to be disastrous for your company that ... Shouldn't you have known that having your workers continue to come to work for 2 weeks would result in you having more cases among your employee group? In answering that question, a lot of times people take a portion of that question. No, we didn't make a mistake. We did such and so. Think about that before the words come out of your mouth. Anticipate that you're going to get some of those leading questions, and make sure the words that come out of your mouth don't repeat misinformation, and that put the frame of the answer in the best possible light, accurate, but best possible light for you. Whenever you're being interviewed by a reporter, you should have in your mind 3 or 4 key points, things that you want when you pick up that copy of the newspaper or look at it online or see the telecast that has your message in it, the things that you want to convey. It's much better to play offense than defense. And don't be afraid to repeat those messages and bridge back to those messages again and again, because, you know, you may be interviewed on camera for 5 or 7 minutes. They're only going to use 30 seconds of your comments. So just because you said it 2 minutes ago doesn't mean that you don't say it again. You may say it better this time. It may be more in context, and that may be the point at which your quote gets used. The last 2 points are really ways to give yourself a little bit of time when you don't know the answer, or you know the answer but you don't know how to correctly respond to it. Asking for clarification, asking a reporter to restate a question, gives you that extra 5-10 seconds to think about how you want to come at this, how you approach it. Sometimes when they ask the question, because you're just asking for clarification, they actually ask a different question and move it on. So if it's one of those difficult questions, sometimes it's one of those things that allows you a little bit extra time. If you don't know the answer, as Carrie said, don't speculate. The best thing you can do is say to folks, I'm not sure. I don't want to give you bad information. Let me check on that and I'll get back to you. So many times leaders feel like that they need to struggle through what they think is a approximately right answer because they're in a position where they think they should, where they think the expectation is you should know the answer. This isn't school. The teacher hasn't called you up in front of class to share information. This is where it's absolutely within your right to say, that's one of those things where I need to check the information and get back with you. We're almost to the end of this presentation. I wanted to share something that's a little bit lighthearted in this time of seriousness. This is a little capturing that underscores what walking the talk really means. This happened a little bit over a week ago when public health officials were suddenly cast in the light of explaining to people how important it is not to touch your face when you're to prevent the spread of viruses. And as you'll see, they had a difficult time.
Start working on not touching your face, because one main way viruses spread is when you touch your own mouth, nose, or eyes. And of course, enhanced cleaning of surfaces.
Well, we're always saying the common sense of washing your hands, not touching your face.
We're looking at every way individuals come into the country, not just through the...
But one of the key parts to preventing transmission is washing your hands and not touching your face. You know, there's a lot of folks that are trying to ask themselves, do I need a mask?
I think these are very important things. Working hard, not to touch your face.
That everyone would have to fill out that would go directly to CDC with that information.
I've been looking around the room here. I can't tell you the number of you who've put your hands to your face in the last 20 minutes or half an hour.
I want to know how many of them are from...
Hear some of the things about washing your hands and not touching your mouth and your nose and your eyes.
Can you tell me why it took 5 days to test the patient and manage them?
The value of hand washing and using sanitizing gels to, if you get the virus on your hands, eliminate it before it finds a way. Don't touch your face. My kids are so sick and tired of me saying if they scratch their face, don't touch your face. That's how viruses get into the body.
So I thought we could use a little bit of levity at that. Just to close, these are some of the things that we do at C2 Strategic Communications. We're fortunate to work with a number of you. And if we can be of help to you now or in the future, we want to be able to do that for you. I think we have time to answer some questions. I know that you've been getting some, so I'll turn it back to you, Sarah and Sydney, to take us through that.
Thank you, Chad, and thank you for that presentation. I can't tell you how many times I kept thinking during that last video, wow, I do that. Wow, I do that. So I know that we're all guilty of doing that, but very informative presentation. Don't touch your face. A few questions for you. You mentioned that there really it's not advisable to use the words no comment. but are there instances where it's better for a company to say no comment? And if so, what are those instances?
Yeah, there are times when you don't have anything to add to the conversation that is going to really address that question, but there are ways to say no comment without saying no comment. And the best way to do that, we counsel, is issuing a statement. So that way the media has a choice of sharing your information as you put it out, or not sharing it at all. And most media outlets will. They won't necessarily take a page-long statement, but if you offer up 2 or 3 sentences, if there's been a major fire at your factory, there's a question about whether people have lost their lives, how it got started, you can issue a statement that says we're working to find the answers out to many questions right now. Our focus is with our employees and their families, and we'll share more information when we know it. And that's it. Think about how you can say no comment without saying no comment, but also think about what you might be able to share that focuses the attention and says something about the character of your energies at this point.
Excellent. And when people are responding in situations like that or other situations, do you recommend that they do a response to the media on the phone so that they can ensure that their message is being conveyed verbally? Or do you think it's better to do it in writing so that they don't necessarily have those leading questions that sometimes result?
Well, issuing a statement is a one-way street. It's a door that you can give that information out, and then if you choose not to answer those questions, you can say, I'm sorry, all that we're going to do at this point is issue this statement. If you have experienced communicators on your team, most of the time, they are going to look for ways to have some give and take. That doesn't mean having an unlimited press conference like, president or the governor or somebody would do. It may be returning a phone call and answering that and saying, I don't have much time. I want to share this statement with you. If you've got a couple questions, I've got time to do that. And then cut it off. You're in control. You can say you can limit what you want to say.
Well, that leads us to a question that I just got in the chat box. Do you think it's possible to communicate too much or too often? And is it different for employers versus politicians, elected officials?
Yes, you can communicate too much information, and you can communicate information too often and become an annoyance and drown things out. So there are, as I mentioned, newsletters are a great example of that right now. If you're sending out a newsletter, don't do it because you've been sending out one a day and you think, gosh, I need to send out a new newsletter today because I've gotten in the habit of sending out a newsletter every day. That doesn't necessarily, you ask yourself, is there new information to convey? Is the same audience that's receiving this, can I bifurcate my audience? Do I have an email? Am I just sending it to email strings that I have because it's easy to play shotgun and it's harder to use the rifle approach? If you have your email database, my guess is that at GLI, you all have your database sorted in ways that if you're communicating with folks in the logistics business, if you want to talk just to them, you can deliver a message to them. If you want to talk to just the largest employers in this community, you all have the tools to be able to do that. So think about how you might touch everybody once a week or with this piece of information, because everybody needs to do it, but you might touch segments of those with different tools or in a different timing.
Very good. And from a company's standpoint, how and when do you suggest that executives begin having conversations, even if no decision has been made? How do you kind of start that conversation early that there might have to be tough decisions made? You want to be honest, but you also don't want to alarm people if decisions haven't been made. What would be your recommendation there?
Yeah. If a person isn't worried about their health and their job right now, they're a rare person. They're either somebody who has a fantastic immune system and complete control over their financial situation, or they're not really thinking very clearly these days. So everybody has some fear right now, and everybody has some uncertainty. This is the time, if you haven't communicated with your employees because you're not sure what to tell them, it's okay to communicate to them and say, there is a lot of information that we are receiving. We're going to share that with you as soon as we can. Right now we're looking. Here are the things that we're focused on. We're focused on, keeping the, protecting the health and safety of people. We're focused on following the guidelines that we're getting from public health officials. We're focused on solving problems and finding solutions. Be patient with us, and we're going to communicate. I know you have a lot of questions. We may not have a lot of answers right now, but we promise that as we get those answers, we will share them with you. That builds trust, and it helps deal with the patience thing. Just holding your hand up or saying that you're afraid to say anything because you might say the wrong thing doesn't send the message of that business leaders are working. It sends the message that they're afraid and they don't know what to say.
Great advice. So no pressure, and you don't have to name specific companies, but you talked about a couple of examples where people were doing things well. Can you describe any instances where people have done things wrong?
Yeah, I think I think some people, some businesses were slow to explain the differences in how they were dealing with employees, some coming to work and some not coming to work, and justifying that. That was a problem for a lot of companies that had a different approach perhaps to white-collar jobs and blue-collar jobs. I saw that in several cases, and I see that as a mistake. I saw a lot of communications early on that was aimed at focusing on the economic aspects of this challenge and not on the health aspects of this. I think that when all is said and done, when this is finished, I think we'll see a lot of people made some critical mistakes because they were fearful of economic hardship over, which is a legitimate concern. But I also think that one of the things I noticed that folks have done is they have thought about communications and what they say today, and then tomorrow they're somewhere else. This is where business leaders, you can think down the chessboard a few moves. You can play that what if scenario. And that's important because that gets into the consistency of your message. If you say today, everything's fine, and tomorrow it's not fine, and the next day your message is, but it's not as fine as we want, but here's what we're doing, and then the next day you do something completely different, that creates a challenge. So this is where policy and business decisions and communications meet. And this is where those of you who have good communicators on your teams may be great managers, great leaders. This is where you need to listen to the communicators, because their job, if they're doing it well for you, is to give you an honest opinion about how that message sounds to your employees, to your customers, to your partners in that, and to adjust your message to be consistent with what you would want to hear, what they're going to need to hear over the long term.
Excellent. And let's talk about money for a moment. If you have invoices that are due from your clients, and you know your clients are also struggling with hardship, and maybe you don't really have a high time pressure on getting your invoice paid, how do you kind of manage through all that communication right now when we know that COVID-19 has impacted everyone to some degree?
Yeah, there's a lot of fear out there right now, and people are, I belong to a Vistage group, a business group, and it's been interesting. About a third of the folks in that group are, all full stop. They're stuck in the water. They're laying off or furloughing people. They're not able to perform business. Another third of them are doing things, somewhat as they have in the past without tremendous impacts. And then another third of them are actually really busy. They have a service or a need that's pretty important. So all people are dealing with this in different ways. So don't assume that how it's affecting you is affecting everybody. Again, honesty is the best policy, and using multiple communications channels. Something like invoicing is something that a lot of times that is just rote in the process. This is the time where you might want to get personal and say, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call Bob or Sue at this company, and I'm going to explain to them where we're at and why, while our terms call for net 30, we probably need net 60, and explain that we're going to pay. Here's what we're doing to make that happen, and ask for their patience. Can't promise you that it's always going to work, but having accurate information is going to be helpful.
Very helpful. All right, we are to our final question here, and it relates to small business owners. Obviously, C2 Strategic Communications is quite a business, and a lot of people hire you guys. But for small businesses that may not have the resources to hire a firm, what is the best way for them to communicate to clients? Is there a platform that you would recommend, a low-cost platform of some kind?
Sure. Most of us have the ability to make some changes in our website, and at a time when people literally can't knock on your front door, your website is your front door. So that's one tool that you can use. And if you have a company that you've used for those types of things, I think if you reach out in this climate and say, hey, I need a special message across here, they're probably going to cut you a deal or build that into the fact that you want to continue doing business with them. You absolutely can use your communications tools, your email. That doesn't cost you anything. It does cost you some time to think about what you want to convey to that and where you want to drive people to. Do you want them to respond to that email? Do you want them to call you? Do you want them to schedule an appointment? How you get that done? Social media, for those of you who have good platforms on that already, using that to convey messages is a good thing. If you don't have the resources to hire somebody to give you good communications advice, think about who on your team is a good communicator and reach out to them for advice in this time. And like I said, your reputation is pretty important during this time. As you think about how you spend your money and you spend your efforts, think about that, because making a mistake in miscommunicating right now can oftentimes lead to a much more costly mistake later. So we know that we work with a lot of nonprofits and small businesses who've called us up and said, we just need some advice. And so we've been able to help them with some advice at a low cost arrangement. So don't assume necessarily that, and certainly it's not just C2, there are other folks out there and GLI members in the communication realm. Reach out to, be honest with them, ask them about what they can do for you, what they can help you think through. Sometimes all you need is just a little bit of advice, and so it'd be better to pay for a few hours of advice, just like you would with your lawyer or your accountant, than it would be to try to do it yourself and find yourself in a world of hurt.
Excellent response. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our Q&A and the end of our webinar today. I just want to say to everyone, thank you for joining, and we are all in this together. I know I've said that at the end of every webinar, but it is true. We are striving to bring you solid information to help your business, and we will continue to do that through these webinars. I hope you won't miss our virtual call tomorrow morning from 9:30 to 10:30 with Tony Watterson, the Executive Director of Work One Southern Indiana. That is an arm of the Indiana Department of Workforce. The webinar will be in partnership with One Southern Indiana. Just a reminder that we will send this recording. We will also post it on our website. Our website does include a tab for COVID-19 resources, and we have got a wealth of information on that page, including all of the daily updates that we've been sending, all of the webinars that you might not have been able to tune into, SBA resources, the list goes on and on. We know this is a difficult time for businesses, it's a difficult time for our community, and we're wanting to do all that we can to help. So we are looking forward to a time after COVID-19, and in the meantime, we will be your resource. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Chad, for presenting. Very, very informative. Stay well, everyone.